Hello, YouTube. So, I thought I would address some frequently asked questions regarding open carrying. First of all, the most obvious question is why open carry? And first of all, most importantly, it's for self-defense from armed or unarmed thugs, mass shooters, any kind of situation you can envision where you would be in great bodily harm. In specifically, why open carrying? Because you could conceal carry a firearm. If you're not comfortable with that, you could carry mace, pepper spray, taser, stun gun, electromuscular device. But specifically with open carrying, specifically with a handgun even, it's best to open carry because not only do you have a faster draw because the weapon is outside your person, but it's an easier draw as well. You don't have to fight clothing to get the weapon out, and that can be very important. Next thing is you can have a larger weapon, which translates into many things. Most importantly, off the top, is easier recoil management. A larger weapon, such as a full-size 1911, is going to be easier to manage than a similar teeny-tiny single-stack Glock 36 in the same caliber. Much lighter, much smaller, much harder to control. But it's very hard to conceal a full-size 1911 unless it's appendix carry or something like that, because it is a large weapon. And to that effect, you can generally carry a larger caliber in the same amount of space, if you want to think about it that way, if it's out on your hip rather than inside your clothing. Generally, I carry 9mm when I'm open carrying because 9mm is not weak like everyone says it is. It is very potent, very powerful, and it's very easy to control, all things considered. I have no problem controlling 40 or 45. That being said, I have in the past open carried Glock 20, 10mm, and that's much larger. That's about the size of a 1911, and 10mm is hard to control, all things considered. It's not that hard, but it is much harder than something like 9mm, 40, or even 45. But again, in a concealed carry situation, you're often restricted to 380 ACP, or even if you're not that lucky, 32 ACP, 38 Special, 25 ACP. So, there's that. The other thing is that because you can carry a larger weapon out on your person rather than inside, you can carry much more ammunition. That's to say that instead of concealed carrying, for example, a Glock 26 with 11 rounds, you could open carry a Glock 17 with a +2 magazine baseplate and you'll have 20 rounds. Just about double. But it'd be very difficult, again, unless it's appendix carry, to carry a Glock 17 with a +2 baseplate. Another very important thing to the open carry for self-defense is that it acts as a visual deterrent. Can't tell you how many times I've been walking down the streets in Detroit, arguably the most violent large city in the United States, and I've had individuals that look at me a certain way and then they see what's on my hip and then they turn tail and go a different way. With the general public, I don't have that. They usually don't flinch or change their motion to avoid me, but let's just say certain individuals in a violent area will do that. You can question their motives, as I certainly do. There's also this debate over whether that deterrent factor is superior to or not the element of surprise you get from concealing. I don't know about that. I don't know if the surprise factor overrules the visual deterrent, and I don't know if it's the other way around. All I can say is that if you're in a situation where you're in a group of people, the average attacker is not going to be very fixated on just you and just what's on your hip. They're going to analyze the group. That's to say, if you're in a restaurant or a party store and it gets held up or something like that. If it's a one-on-one situation, or you got multiple people on you, they'll be much more able to notice, and they might feel bold enough to attack you anyways. That's something that I can't really guarantee, but it is a factor. That covers all of open carrying with a handgun. However, I need to move on to the more controversial subject, which is why open carry a rifle. And first and foremost, a lot of people don't realize this, it's to acclimate the ignorant public to the sight of a firearm. That applies to the handgun as well. If I'm sitting in a restaurant with a handgun, people will be like, oh, there's a guy there with a gun. I mean, he's not shooting up the place. He doesn't appear to be violent. He doesn't appear to be crazy. That's unusual. I thought guns were only used for bad stuff. You could imagine many people that might think along that lines. I know I've met those kind of people. So again, especially with a rifle, it is to acclimate the public to the sight. A non-violent person walking around with a very scary weapon. Next, and this goes hand in hand with that, is to educate the public. And I don't mean that in a passive sense, but in an active sense, as I've had many times, someone will come up to me and ask me, so are you a cop or something like that? My favorite is that real? And I can tell them a little bit about why I open carry. First of all, depending on their background, why carry a gun in the first place. Because sometimes I have concealed carry people come up and say something to the effect of, oh, I didn't know you were allowed to open carry in here. Or open carry is legal or something to that effect. And yes, it is. Unless you're in Texas. So, again, educating the public not only about open carry, but carrying and owning firearms in general. Very important. Next thing, and this is not quite as important to acclimating the public in my personal opinion, but is to acclimate the police so that law enforcement sees a man with a rifle or a handgun, and again, he's not committing any crimes. At least there's no reasonable articulable suspicion that he is committing a crime. He's not shooting up the place. He's not pointing it at people. He's a perfectly sane, perfectly safe person. And that may not be something they see every day, depending on the context in which they work. And that's important. And along the same line, it's also the duty to educate the police. Because there are many police that have no idea the intricacies of the open carry laws in my state or in other states. Especially parts about, in Michigan, for example, if you don't have a permit, you can open carry in all these places and not in these places. If you conceal carry and you have a permit to do so, you cannot carry in all these places. But if you have a concealed carry permit and you are open carrying, you are almost completely exempt from almost any pistol-free zone you could imagine, with the exception of private property and federal property. There are a couple minor exceptions to that, but for the most part, there is no such thing as a pistol-free zone when you're open carrying in Michigan with a permit to carry concealed. A lot of police do not realize that, and more importantly than that, most police do not realize that their stopping of a person open carrying with whatever weapon does not constitute reasonable articulable suspicion, and they cannot, therefore, initiate a Terry stop where they frisk you and whatnot, which I've had done several times, where they frisk me without my consent and without reasonable articulable suspicion to suspect that they've committed a crime. And along that line, when those police do things like that, open carrying also becomes about exposing those officers, which I use that term loosely, that choose to violate rights either out of ignorance or out of apathy. I would tend to think that the latter is the more dangerous of the two. Ignorance can be cured. Apathy is, I would tend to think, a terminal condition. And part of exposing the police, depending on the situation, may be to sue them as well. And that provides a very strong incentive for them to change their ways, or for the department to fire those bad police officers, or to retrain them, or keep a better eye on them. And along that line, it all goes on YouTube, or at least everything I've recorded goes on YouTube. And out of my open carry stops with police officers, I can think of only 2 scenarios that I've been stopped where I did not have the ability to record the encounter. And both of those times, it was handgun only, and the officers were deputies. Therefore, on average, I find them to be much more informed, much more respectful. And they consulted with the establishment owner where I was, and they let me stay. And that was the end of story. And when these recordings end up on YouTube, there are always the uninformed that will comment, sometimes saying perfectly intelligent things that I'm happy to answer, and sometimes things that are just downright disrespectful and downright embarrassing for the human species, and therefore I am able to respond to those things. Perhaps, arguably, the most important part about open carrying rather than concealed carrying is that you are philosophically withdrawing your consent from the growth of the police state that we are now living in. If you've been watching the news at all, you know we are living in a surveillance state, a police state where our rights are being incrementally seized. And this, I think, is a very good way to withdraw that consent, to say, no, I will not drink the Kool-Aid. I am going to be my own person. Yes, it's weird, as many people might say, to carry a firearm, especially openly. But I am my own person. I have a right to self-defense, and I will open carry if I want to. One other note that I feel I should address is that I get a lot of flack from people when I do not identify myself when the officer asks, making arguments such as, just make their jobs easier, you'll be detained for less time if you just give it up. But again, giving them your identification when they have no reasonable articulable suspicion to seize it from you is implying that you consent to the tyranny and the police state that is growing, and I won't be a part of that. I had someone on one of my videos say something to the effect of your rights, and I find that very disturbing, because this person must not realize that they're your rights too. You have every right to go out and carry a firearm. I don't care if you live in Illinois or not. You have the right to carry a firearm. Those rights are not given by the government, not given by the Constitution. They're given by God. And they're only codified in the Constitution. And if you do live in a place like Illinois, doesn't matter. You still have that right. It's just that the government does not respect that right there. We are losing so many liberties so quickly in so many facets of our country that this is one place where we can legally, lawfully, peacefully withdraw that consent and stand our ground. And if you think that Nazi Germany is just a page in history, that the Soviet Union is just a page in history, that the Khmer Rouge, just a page in history, you're wrong. Because it can happen here. And I fear it will happen here.